glad you could join us for this morning webinar, updated perspectives on the pandemic and policy responses. My name is Nick Paulson, member of the FarmDoc team and a faculty member in the Ag and Consumer Economics Department at the University of Illinois. I'm joined this morning by Gary Schnitkey and also Jonathan Coppess, and I think Jonathan is going to kick things off for us. So I'll turn it over to him. Before we do that, or as we're doing that, we've got a couple poll questions this morning. And our first one is just a opinion question. Has the federal government response for agriculture been about right given the circumstances, too little, or too much? We'll let you all take a few seconds here to answer that poll. Let's see here, we've got close to 100 people on with us this morning. About half of you have voted, just approaching the halfway mark on the voting. I'll give you just a few more seconds there to answer that poll question. All right, so for our responses, looks like about 70% of you think the response for agriculture has been about right, about 30% too little, and just a few responses, or about 2%, say that there's been too much response for agriculture. So some interesting results there. So as I said, Jonathan's going to kick it off for this morning. I'll turn it over to him and let you take it away, Jonathan.
Thank you, Nick, and good morning, everybody. And I would add one thing for our introductory comments here. Just want to say a special thank you to Illinois Soybean Association, along with the Illinois Corn Growers and Farm Bureau, who sponsored this, and Mike and the team at Illinois Soybeans approached us a while back about doing a webinar, and we did not know that the timing would work out such that we would learn what we've learned about the CFAP program just in advance of this. So we do appreciate their continued support and their sponsorship of this webinar here this morning. So with that, we can get my horrible picture off the screen. And really at this point, we're just sort of kind of placing this all into context. So this first slide is trying to look at the variety of payments, or the different form of payments that we've seen, and put the CFAP into some sort of comparative position. So the CFAP payments for 2020 thus far, the red bars that you see in front of you. For corn, certainly this looks as if I should add, the CFAP numbers are from USDA's estimate and its rule and its cost benefit analysis of what they think it's going to pay out by crop. So obviously, we don't know yet, based on some of the things that we're going to talk about here today, just on how this program will pay out. For soybeans, a lot less than what was seen in the MFP program. So this gives you a sort of a comparison of where this program sits, and certainly we don't necessarily think this will be the only round of this if the pandemic challenges continue. We've also got in there ARC and PLC, and if everybody probably knows painfully well that there's a time lag in these ARC and PLC payments. So they don't line up quite the same. So we've got 3 different years in there. That the 2017 crop would have paid in fall of 2019, and so forth. And so you can see those numbers in there from CBO's estimates, the Congressional Budget Office estimates of what those payments look like. And really, this is just both a reminder of the entirety of a big part of what's going out in terms of payments for farmers, but also a sense, again, to where CFAP so far looks to be going. Go ahead and jump to the next slide. So just an overview of this program. Application period begins today. So again, the timing is about as good as we could get it. It'll run through the end of August 28th. We, unlike some programs in which we say there's a reason to wait, we don't see really any reason to hold off. Get in and sign up when you can. There's no further information that we're expecting that would impact that decision at all. Also, just some basics. There's a $250,000 per person per entity payment limit, and there's a $900,000 average adjusted gross income AGI eligibility test. Now that $900,000 is if you got AGI over $900,000 average across 2016, 17, and 18 tax years, then you're ineligible for payments. If you're eligible for payments, then you can get up to $250,000 per person. with all the usual rules applying through that. There are some changes in particular for corporations and some entities that may not be used to this system as much as row crop farmers are. There could be some challenges there. And just a reminder that the payments themselves, while we're going to go through a variety of the details of this, it is really just a single payment as designed. It comes out of two different pots of funding for the payments, and that seems confusing, but it doesn't really affect the payment. What's going to happen is you have one single overall payment, and it's split into two tranches or installments. You're going to get 80% of it up front, and then they're holding 20% of all the payments back to make sure. Remember, this is a set pot of funding, so this isn't like the usual CCC kind of situation. So there is a fixed amount of money. So they're going to pay out 80% up front, and then when presuming they haven't used it all up, they'll come back and do the other 20% in the second installment. Or we can always imagine new programs if needed. Go ahead and jump to the next slide. Again, this just sort of breaks down what is in USDA's cost benefit analysis, what they estimate to be going on. There's $9.5 billion that Congress provided in the CARES Act back at the end of March. That was a $9.5 billion appropriations to the Secretary. They've combined that with $6.5 billion from the CCC. So if you've read through any of the materials, you'll see kind of these, a percent from this, a percent from that. At the end of the day, they've got $16 billion, what they think $16 billion available in total payments for non-specialty crops. That's the standard commodity row crops, specialty crops, dairy, and livestock. They're estimating about $19 billion, but with the payment limits, they are estimating it comes down to 16 is where they get their total numbers if you're doing that math. But again, the 9.5 and the 6.5 are really just the administrative issues. It's the pots of money that they're pulling from to make the payments. It doesn't really impact. You're not going to get a payment from a CCC and somewhere else. It's going to be one payment come out. And then here on the side, you see the estimate. Again, this is USDA's estimate of what they think is going to be spent out of the $16 billion across the board. And of course, with cattle, it looks like they're estimating cattle will receive the bulk of the payments. For row crops, we're about $3.8 billion, roughly, in estimated payments for those commodities. Go ahead and move. And then we're just, again, keeping everything, or trying to keep everything in perspective a little bit. This is one part of the CFAP program. About 84% of all the funds, about the $19 billion announced, are going out to farmer assistance. There's also some food assistance that they have announced as part of this. In particular, the purchasing of meat products, of dairy products, and fresh fruit and vegetables. And then they're going to distribute those through food banks and other outlets, and we're about 6% of the total has been contracted, and they say they've got another 10% that they may potentially purchase for food. But overall, this program, this coronavirus food assistance program, the vast majority of it right now is going out to help farmers and help producers with the market impacts of the responses to the pandemic. Go ahead, next slide. So with that, we will jump into another poll. So here is a poll and a question for you guys. Should the recent ARC and PLC decision, as you remember, you made the ARC and PLC decision back in March, should that be reopened and allow farmers a chance to reconsider the program election they made? If you remember, that program election was for the 2019 crop and for this year's 2020 crop. So is that something that should be opened as a part of the effort to help farmers? And I don't know, Gary or Nick, I don't see poll responses. So one of you guys are going to have to let us know when we've hit the
we're about halfway.
The magic level.
Half have responded. Continuing to climb. We'll give people a few more seconds to respond to those. All right.
All right, Nick, it's all yours.
All right, interesting. So fairly equal split. About a third say no, let the decision stand. A third say let's just give the highest payment. and then kind of split between the other two options we have there as well. So this ARC PLC enrollment decision is something I'll say a few things about here kind of towards the end of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to focus mainly on the CFAP program. We're going to try to, I don't know if we'll succeed in simplifying how the payments are calculated, but we're going to attempt to at least simplify it down to kind of what the farmer needs to be worried about in terms of collecting information, and then try to explain how that payment will get calculated from that. So probably the key thing to understand here, and this is terminology that we're kind of using from the final rulemaking from USDA. And on the non-specialty crop side of things, so for the row crop payments in the CFAP program, everything is based on what they're defining as an eligible inventory number. So Gary, if you want to advance here. So what is eligible inventory? So the way that the rulemaking has defined this for the CFAP program is it's the smaller of two numbers. So the first one is either self-certified unpriced inventory. We'll talk about what we think or what they've defined as unpriced inventory in a second. But it's either the lower of self-certified unpriced inventory as of January 15th or 50% of total 2019 production. So, a number of different ways to say this, but this program is designed to provide some support for unpriced grain, unpriced commodities, and they're capping the percentage of total production that could potentially be supported in this program at 50% of the total 2019 crop. So that unpriced inventory or inventory number as of January 15th, and then also your 2019 production figures would be the two numbers that you'd want to have when you go ahead and fill out that CFAP application. Again, USDA provided some guidance. If you want to just continue ahead, Gary, I think a couple more times on this slide. They did provide some language on what unpriced inventory means. So we're just taking some quotations here from the final rule document, which is available at the farmers.gov website at the CFAP program site. So there's language that talks about how they're defining unpriced inventories. It probably doesn't clear up everybody's questions just based on the language. There is the language there that says subject to price risk, and they provide a little bit more definition around what subject to price risk means. So if you want to advance to the last box there, Gary, again, some language from the FSA notice about the program. So any production, sales, inventory that is not subject to an agreed upon price in the future through a forward contract agreement or similar binding document must still be at risk of price fluctuations after January 15th. Again, a lot of gray area. We realize a lot of uncertainty about how to actually define what is an unpriced inventory. And we can try to answer some questions about that later on this morning, but that's kind of where we stand. Again, the non-specialty crop program here is based on a payment rate that's applied to this eligible inventory number. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at what the payment rates are for the non-specialty crops. As Jonathan pointed out, this is a program that is paying out of two separate pots of money, some coming from the stimulus package from the CARES Act. So you see there a list of payment rates associated with the CARES Act payment portion. And then you also see a separate payment rate for the CCC funded portion of the CFAP payment. Again, I want to emphasize that the way this is written is there will be a single payment made to the farmer. There's a CFAP payment. It's just coming from two different sources of funds, CARES Act and CCC. So ultimately, if we kind of simplify the arguably complex math that the USDA provided in their regulatory documents, what's ultimately going on in this non-specialty crop program is you're paid the average of that CARES Act and CCC payment rate on your eligible inventories. Right, so that last column there that's now got the red box around it is the average payment rate of those CARES Act and CCC rates. That's what you're getting per bushel of eligible inventory in the program. So 33.5 cents on corn, 47.5 cents on soybeans, and you can see the other crops that were included in the non-specialty crop grouping here. So let's go ahead and move ahead, and we'll take a look at some payment examples, and we'll just use corn as an example. So if we start by looking at the left, and Gary, if you want to advance again, I want to highlight, again, the two numbers that we expect farmers are going to need to provide in the application process, and really the thing that the farmer has the responsibility of collecting and verifying, and then these numbers are what will affect your payment. So here we've got the total bushels number would be your total 2019 production in this example. And then in this case, we've got an unpriced inventory value of 130,000 bushels. So 200,000 bushels total produced in 2019, 130,000 still unpriced as of January 15th. If that was the scenario we were looking at, if you want to advance, your eligible inventory number, again, the amount that the payment would be based on would be the $100,000 cap of 50% of total production. And that's because the unpriced inventory number here exceeded that 100,000. So in this case, we'd have 100,000 bushels of eligible inventory to receive a payment. Multiply that by the 33.5 cent average payment rate. That would give you a CFAP payment of $33,500. If you want to advance again, Gary. And that would be paid out in the 2 installments. So 26,800 would be the 80% available quickly. I don't want to use the word immediately because I don't know how quickly those payments will be received once you apply, but fairly quickly. And then the 20% in installment 2 that they will hold back and provide pending funding availability. So just as another example, let's take a look at a case where everything is the same in terms of total production. So we produce 200,000 bushels, but in this case, we have a smaller inventory amount. So we've only got 80,000 bushels that are unpriced as of January 15th. In that case, the eligible inventory number that the program would make a payment on is that 80,000 bushels in unpriced inventory. Multiply that by your 33.5 cent rate. That's a $26,800 payment. That would be split out into the first installment of 21,440, or 80% of the total, and the second installment, again, pending funding availability to be made at some later date. All right, let's jump ahead and talk a little bit about the livestock and dairy components of CFAP. So for cattle and hogs, again, this program is something that's going to make a single CFAP payment, but it's coming from 2 separate sources of funds. That's true for all the commodities included here, whether it's crops or livestock. In the case of cattle and hogs, it's something where the payments that come from the different funds are actually based on 2 different time periods. So for cattle and hogs, we've got the CARES Act funding is providing payments based on sales from January 15th through April 15th of 2020. And then the CCC funds are being used to compensate producers for the largest inventory that was held between April 16th and May 14th. Okay, so for cattle and hogs, we've got a CARES Act payment associated with the sales number in the first 3 months of the year, roughly first 3 months of the year. And we've got the CCC payment, which is associated with inventories over a 2-month period from mid-April to mid-May, or a single month period. On the dairy side of things, everything is based off of production during the first quarter of calendar year 2020. Again, there's a CARES Act payment rate that generates a CARES Act payment on the first quarter production, and then there's a different CCC payment rate that, for whatever reason, pays out on 101.4% of production from the first quarter. So, first quarter production is the number that matters from the farmer's perspective, and then they apply a couple of different payment rates to ultimately get to a single CFAP payment on the dairy side of things. All right, Gary, if you want to advance, I think we've got an example here for livestock. So we'll just look at a simple cattle example. So again, if you look on the left, want to emphasize the fact that based on how the program is written, what the farmer needs to kind of worry about and the information that they need to gather and be prepared for application is a sales number for that January 15th to April 15th period, and then their largest inventory held between April 16th and May 14th. What they'll do with that sales number from the January to April time period is they will take the number of head sold, and they will multiply that by a CARES Act payment rate that is specific to the animal type. In this case, we're looking at slaughter cattle, fed cattle, that would be compensated at $214 a head. So if you had 500 heads sold between January 15th and April 15th, you'd get $107,000 in payments for those. That would be your CARES Act component of the CFAP payment. And then if you had 250 head maximum inventory, again, this payment rate is uniform across all of the cattle types here at $33 a head. So you'd get 250 head at $33 a head, or $8,250 in CCC funds. Those are combined into that single CFAP payment of $115,250. Just like the non-specialty crop program, 80% of that is paid out in a first installment upon application approval, and then 20% is held back as a second installment that'll be made pending availability of those funds at a later date. All right, let's go ahead and advance again. Wanted to just make everybody aware of some of the other CFAP resources that are out there. Again, this was just announced, I think last Wednesday and Thursday was when the website got up, and the final rulemaking that all of our information is based on, I believe, went in the Federal Register on Thursday. You can see on the left here, we got a FarmDoc Daily article out on Friday that goes through the examples we just talked about this morning, provides a little bit of detail and explanation on how the program is going to work. And then on the right, we've got the screenshot of the farmers.gov website for the CFAP program. And you can see the URL there at the bottom right in the screen in orange. Highly suggest going to the USDA website for more information. Obviously, contacting your local FSA office, and then as well as that FarmDoc Daily article, as well as I'm sure some additional analysis we'll have coming out in the next weeks as we continue to learn more. If you want to go ahead and advance, Gary. So now, before I turn it over to Gary, I wanted to switch gears a little bit here and get back to this ARC PLC issue. So Gary, if you want to go to that.
Hey, Nick, you want to?
Yeah.
There's a couple questions here that we could handle real quick.
Sure.
So here's the first one. Could livestock producers only get the CCC payment or CFAP payment, not average for both, like row crops? So, my end.
So why don't we back up to that slide that went through the cattle example. So again, the non-specialty crop program, FSA is gonna go through the same kind of calculation process where they calculate a CARES Act payment separate from a CCC payment, but it's all based on that same bushel information that you give them, and then they'll combine those things, those two payments together into a single CFAP payment. And the reason that we kind of simplified things on the non-specialty crop side is you can simplify it by just looking at the average payment rate. For livestock, you can't do that. It actually is two separate payments based on two separate production numbers. You get the sales number from the first 3 months, or January 15th to April 15th, and you got the inventory for that month period from mid-April to mid-May. And the payment that sales number is based on is coming from the CARES Act. The payment that the inventory number is based on is coming from CCC. But those two things get added together into an overall CFAP payment for the farmer. I don't know. Does that answer the question, Gary? Do you think? Or
Yeah, I think that does a pretty good job of it. Now we're going to get into a couple questions that we don't know how the answers to, but we'll state them. Why was the cattle selling period chosen? My worst sales were from April 16th to the present. That is when sellers lost $350 to $400 per head. Cattle sold in the early 80s were still in the high 120s. Really hurts a seasonal grower. And we don't know why. We made that same observation, and we don't know. I don't know, Nick, Jonathan, if you have anything else to add there.
I mean, the only thing, it's a great question, and it is a question, Gary, as you said, kind of applies across the board on a lot of the decisions made. We don't know, and we don't know how many of these decisions are made to try to keep within a funding limit or whatnot. So it's a tough question to see, and I don't know that we're going to get an answer for that one.
And there are two other questions here, and again, both of these are very good ones. And this one relates to grain. How will they handle price later basis or hedged bushels? We've run that through our mind. And any comments there?
yeah, so I mean, we've talked a lot about this in the last, I guess, 6 days since they released this information. They talk about, there's price risk after January 15th. I mean, I think Gary, you and I have agreed that, your traditional fixed price forward contract is probably something that those bushels would not qualify for a CFAP payment. But once you get into, if you're directly hedging on the futures, you've still got basis risk. So, I would argue that there's still price risk involved there. We've talked about basis contracts. I think our opinion is that those bushels would still qualify. There's still price risk that those bushels will be subject to. I don't know what else you want to add, Gary. I think that's where we've settled, but again, we don't have any verification that what we think is necessarily how FSA wants you to do it.
Just a quick note, we have been in discussions with Illinois FSA, and they're going to help us distribute that information. And so look to our website. They know that information, or they know the questions that you're asking as well, and we will be getting those answered to you as soon as possible. The other one is seed corn an eligible crop, which is a good question as well. So those are a couple of questions that are coming. And the eligible inventory is the major question about this program. All right.
Now, and I don't want to downplay the questions still surrounding that, or I didn't mean to do that, but again, there's been a lot of confusion. I noticed on Twitter a lot of interesting payment calculation examples that ended up being wrong that were kind of circulated Wednesday and Thursday as people were trying to get the word out before they really read the rules. I think some information has maybe been displayed in potentially confusing or misleading ways, but it's just got the information. And so again, I think, focusing on what the farmer needs to provide is probably the priority in terms of, the records that you might need to show what 2019 production was, what some kind of inventory number as of that January 15th timeframe. Not an easy thing to do, I realize, for a lot of situations, but that is the information that the farmer is going to need to provide. The payment rates and everything will be calculated, for you based on that information.
And just so you know, FSA completed their training last week, so we will be getting that material to you as soon as we know. So go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry.
No problem. So we'll again switch gears here to kind of come back to this ARC PLC decision post-COVID. This is an issue that we've gotten a lot of questions, comments on in the last few months. We had the ARC PLC deadline basically come right ahead of when a lot of states went into lockdown. And we started seeing some of the major effects of COVID on ag commodities in March. And with the lower prices that we've seen, there is an increased chance, as well as increased potential size of payments from both programs. But just because of the way they work, some of those effects aren't always maybe what we would expect. We've got, limits on the size of that ARC payment that become relevant. We've got, the differences between the benchmark price in ARC and the PLC reference price for soybeans. So things it depends on the crop you're looking at and how these lower prices have affected the relative comparison of the programs. Well, what we've found, and Gary's done a lot of analysis on this across counties across the Illinois as well as across the country. And if we're kind of reassessing this ARC PLC decision at this point, it looks like PLC for corn and ARC County for soybeans still results in the largest expected payment for the majority of situations. And that's where we were at before COVID as well, leading into the March enrollment deadline. There are some counties situations where ARC County now does look better for corn, at least for the 2009 crop year than it did prior to the COVID effects. And then ARC IC still remains a competitive option, particularly on prevent plant farms from 2019. And it's kind of the same decision trade-off that you're looking at is, in most cases, a large known ARC IC payment for 2019, but potentially nothing or very small payment with that program in 2020 versus with one of the other programs, smaller payment in 2019, but a potentially larger payment from PLC or ARC County in 2020. So again, the lower prices have increased the chance of payments, the potential size, but kind of the relatively rare case where it would necessarily maybe change the decision. So some of the thoughts, comments, suggestions we've heard is go back and reopen the decision, allow producers to change what they enrolled in for 2019, 2020. Another alternative is going back and just saying, we're just going to give farmers the higher of the two, whichever program triggers the higher payment for your situation. We'll give you that in 2020. Again, those are ideas that have been floated. I do want to emphasize, though, that as of right now, nothing has changed. There's been no official word or movement on this in terms of reopening that ARC PLC decision or making any changes. So I guess as of now, we're moving forward, or we should be moving forward with those ARC PLC decisions that were made in March being in place for 19 and 20. We did write a daily article again on this topic. May 19th, you can see the screenshot of that article there. Kind of did some analysis and talks about a few of the things I mentioned in the last few minutes in more detail on how COVID has potentially changed how we would look at those ARC and PLC programs for the next for 2019 and 2020. I think with that, I think Gary's gonna take over from here. You wanna roll out the poll question here, Gary?
Yeah. So we just want to get a feel here. Have you changed production decisions as a result of COVID-19? And just give you some answers here. We want to see what your thinking is. Have you done? And again, COVID-19, like many of the things that we've seen, came on relatively late, and so some of you probably didn't have a chance to make many changes, and some of the economics may have said not to make many changes. So we give you four responses up there to see what you were thinking about what you did. And so if you could answer that, we are going to switch a little bit now to just looking a little bit about what the CFAP payments and other payments mean for income in 2020. So if you would take a couple minutes and answer that poll, and we'll show you the results here here as soon as Jim thinks we have enough voters to vote. And I think we've closed the poll. About 40 some percent of you have answered. 12% said you switched to more crops. None of you said you switched to more corn. 7% reduced inputs, and 81% no change in production and decisions. Something that we would have probably expected, actually. So I'm going to take you through some sort of where we're looking at this now from a farm income standpoint, and maybe provide some management advice as we're moving forward. Just a reminder where we're at price-wise. This is current as of May 21. We've seen Central Illinois and all cash corn and soybean prices fall dramatically since the beginning of the year. Much of that can be directly attributed to COVID-19, but we were running high $3 corn at the beginning of the year, and now we just hit $3 again at the end of the month. We had a bit of a rally. We were in the $2.90 range here in Central Illinois. Now we hit $3, so a little bit of a rally. But if anything, we've sort of stabilized at that $3 to $2.90 range on cash corn here in Illinois. Soybeans have shown a similar, or have shown a decline as well, from over $9, and now we're at the low $8 range. $8.19 was our AMS reported price on May 21st. Obviously, that is then going to have impacts on our cash sales on our 2019 crop, and has reduced our outlook for 2020 and 2021. To give you a feel for what we're thinking, we have a couple scenarios here. Pre-COVID, you see the 2016, 17, and 18 prices. These are market year average prices again. So 2018, the market year average price for corn was $3.61. Pre-COVID, we were looking at $3.85, and actually that was what WASDE was projecting, and sort of $3.70 for 2020 and $3.60 for 2021. Post-COVID, and this was looking at futures markets and considering some other things, $3.50 now looks like the market year average price for 2019. 2020, again, this is based on futures prices, $3.20, and 2021, $3.40. This is a recovery that, in my mind, would be pretty quick. What we're building in here is a case that that ethanol and ethanol use comes back, and we get our export demand back, and we get livestock demand back. Looking at soybeans, $8.75 was the projection pre-COVID. Now you're looking at something like $8.50 for 2020. $8.15 again. This would be for the 2020 crop, and 2021 $8.30. If you're looking at that $3.20 price for 2020, $8.15 price for soybeans for 2020, that is given a trend yield. If we see above average trend yields, you could be looking at below $3 corn for 2020 and closer to $8 soybeans for 2020. So that's sort of, those 2020 projections are contingent on trend line yields, and again, typically what you would see if you have good yielding years, you would see that price come down. Again, high yielding year then would also lead into more carryout, and probably that 2021 crop also coming down to, lower $3 per range for corn and lower $8 range for soybeans. Again, we're projecting way out, but those would be what sort of the futures markets are saying now, as well as just modeling efforts would sort of come out to the same place. So those prices changed our outlook, and I'm going to give you first here what that has done to 2019 returns. Again, 2019, we've seen prices come down. Pre-COVID, we were using for Central Illinois a $3.85 price for corn, $8.80 for soybeans, and post-COVID, you're looking at that price being $3.55 for corn, $8.55 for soybeans. Built those a bit higher than the market year average price, and we also built in here that CFAP payment. And the first payment for corn would be $28 and $12 for soybeans, and then a $7 and a $3 payment. Overall, and again, remember that second round of CFAP payment is not guaranteed. We built in that $28 and $7 payment for corn and $12 and $3 payment for soybeans for CFAP based on the having the maximum payment on inventory, 50% of production, that we were holding that in inventory on January 15th, and it was eligible for the payment. That also means if you're looking at these numbers and that 388 to 355, obviously different producers are going to be impacted differently by what's happened in COVID-19, and those individuals that stored more unpriced grain are going to have the larger impact. Overall, though, the price decline, and you can think of this as sort of the average impact on 2019 income, we were looking at a $20 farmer return if we look at that at 50-50 corn, soybean before, $6 afterwards. So a reduction in returns. And if you're looking at income statements for 2020, that reduction, what most people will see will be that they put their unpriced inventory on DEES 31 at a higher price than they received for it, but they will also see a CFAP payment in there as well. So that just sort of gives you a feel for what we're going to be looking at lower returns on the 2019 crop on average because of those price declines. And by the way, those price declines happening as late as they did in the marketing year is truly unordinary. Typically by this time of the marketing year, we can see price changes, but typically nothing as large as we did. Moving forward, so this is 2020. So now we're looking at 2020 returns. We put our $3.25 price in there for corn, $8.20 for soybeans, and now just so you note there at the bottom, there's another $80 CFAP payment. So we built into these budgets a continuing payment that has not been legislated at this point. There's no announcement of that. We're assuming that there's going to be $80 or more payment someplace that's going to be applicable to the 2020 crop. Whether that's CFAP, MFP is a good question. Again, that's a projection. There's no guarantee of that. There's nothing formal of that. So, but we've built that into the projections. If that $80 doesn't happen, obviously those numbers, those farmer return numbers at the bottom, go down by $80. So with that $80 CFAP return and a 50-50 corn soybean rotation, you would be looking at $104 per acre farmer return in 2018, $6 in 2019, and minus $2 per acre in 2020. Again, what's causing that to come down is that lower prices. That results in those lower returns. Now, one of the things that we may be hoping for and could happen is above trend yields in Central Illinois in 2020. Those yields could be 230 and 70s in 2020. That's a realistic expectation, or that could happen. Depends a lot on July weather, obviously. So we're looking at that. If that does happen, though, I would expect those prices to decline. So if we're looking at above trend yield, so there will be a countering impact. Just because we have higher yields don't necessarily mean that we'll have higher returns. Just another note is that if that $80 comes true, and again, there's nothing legislated about that. There's nothing announced. USDA has not announced it. Just basing that on headwinds, there would be over $100 per acre in CFAP, averaged over corn and soybeans in 2020. So that's where we're at. If we're looking at returns to crop farms in 2020, a lot of it will be related to government payments. So here, now we're going to be looking forward. We're expecting or building in a projection of $80 more. Do you believe the federal government do another CFAP or MFP program in 2021? So this isn't this year, this is next year. if corn prices are near $3 and soybean prices are near $8. So think about that. Do you think there will be a payment? And we sort of broke it out in yes, in $50, over $50, yes, no, under $50, and 20, and then no payment. And right now, my personal opinion, this is a pretty key assumption that we're making here. And it's pretty important as we begin to make the decisions that we will be setting up in August and September for 2021 production. So looking forward down the road, 47% of you have voted. So we're getting close to the end. Jim said it's enough as of you has voted. And here's what you said. 47% believe there will be a payment of over $50 per acre. 26 between 0 and 50, and 28% said no. So there is where we're at. Frankly, if I look at what's the economics of the situation is, I would look at 2020 to be an extremely awful year for hog producers, dairy producers, beef producers. After all is said and done, that the brunt of CFAP will hopefully be felt in 2020 and maybe some rebounds in 2021. For crop farmers, if we get sort of somewhat expected levels of CFAP payment or government aid, it may be 2021. Here, we built in a 2021 budget with just a trend yield. We're seeing some increases in prices here. Again, we're looking at 2021. We're doing this probably way too early, but again, we're going to be making cash rent decisions here in August, so that's not that far away. But if you build in no government payments, you would be looking at a minus $78 return for corn and minus $40 for soybeans. Again, that would show 104 in 2018, 6 in 2019, minus 2 in 2020, and then finally a minus 59. Again, if you get a $50 payment, you would sort of be back at a minus $9 level. If you get an $80 payment, you would sort of be back in that 2019, sort of between 2019 and 2018 and 2019 range. Again, we're a ways away from there, but that is sort of what you're looking at as far as going into 2021. So not to sound like a broken record, but be careful when we're setting our cash rents for 2021. Again, what we've seen since 2013 is basically a break-even proposition for cash rents since 2014, 15. And I would say we've always been thinking that next year is the year we get back to normal, whatever normal is. Well, normal now might be low $3 corn and low $8 soybeans for a while. So be careful setting those 2021 cash rents. And again, a lot of the rent, if you keep the rent at the same level, you're betting on, or you're banking on, another CFAP payment or sort of government program payment in 2021. I would suggest evaluating price prospects at the end of the summer. And if you're looking at futures contracts, these 2021 contracts suggesting cash prices of low and $8, lower cash rents, or use a variable cash rent. Again, I've said that a number of times, but again, you know, it just we keep eroding the last several years, we have made our economic situation work because of government programs. So there we are. And if you're going to use a cash rent, I would suggest building in a clause so that it sort of varies with or without MFP and CFAP payments. And we will work on that over the next while. Here, just to end, here's where I think we will be on crop farms with additional government aid. Again, we got the CFAP program and maybe some more coming for the 2020 crop. Most farmers will be okay, and I would call that okay. We'll make it through this year. Won't be great. There will be some financial losses, but overall, if we get some additional government aid will be okay at the 2021. We'll see slight erosions or maybe larger erosions in working capital. Debt to asset ratios will edge up, as actually they have been in the past couple years. But 2021 is the question. Here, I would still, hopefully most of you are planted, but if you do plant soybeans on switchable acres, actually, if we're coming up on June 5th, if we reach June 5th and prevent plant on corn is an option, consider it strongly. Because remember, where we're at projected price-wise versus where we are now on those contracts, we are much lower price-wise. That is what the difference will be this year versus last year. I would also consider, and these may be closed now again, but PPP and idle, and again, conserve all working capital. That sounds like a broken record for me, though, so take it for what it's worth. Here's the thing, though. I would start marketing the remaining 2019 crop. I think we're at these lower levels, and you might as well do what you need to do and not be expecting much in the future. Somewhat ironically, the CFAP program does introduce an incentive to hold grain because they paid on unpriced, but I still think we need to move that grain forward and maybe not bet on what CFAP will continue to do for the 2020 crop. I would also suggest beginning marketing the 2020 crop, and I think we're just going to have to set lower price goals. And while these are low prices, just remember we are now operating where they could go lower if we have a good yielding year. I mean, we're setting up where a good yielding year could result in lower prices than we're looking at. That's not a prediction. That's just if we're coming to July and it does turn out that July is conducive to being a good crop, and again we have a good crop, prices could be lower than we're looking at now. And again, the danger point is setting cash rents. So if you're looking at this, there's sort of a bright side and not bright side. I think we will, crop farm wise, we will be able to manage 2020 with government aid. And it's 2021 that we get really concerned about. So if you got questions, put them in here. We got a couple slides here where we gave you some bonus information. I'm not going to go through those, but if you download those, you'll see some information in our farmdoc daily information. We thank our sponsors, and we thank particularly our sponsors of this webinar, Illinois Soybean Association, Illinois Corn Growers, and Illinois Farm Bureaus. We value their support of us, and we really value those farm organizations. They are top-notch organizations and have done a lot for Illinois farmers, and we appreciate what they do for the University of Illinois. We do have an upcoming webinar here on May 29th, 9 to 10, and that will provide a summary of 2019 FBFM incomes on farms. And we're working on a couple more, just going over that. Essentially, the ineligible inventory question, which we are eligible inventory question. So those are coming up. So here's a good question. Jonathan can take this. Or Nick, both of you can answer this. This is a good one for great thinkers. How do we head into the next farm bill debate if we're abandoning traditional safety net and into this new era of ad hoc assistance that is harder to count on? So, Jonathan, Nick, what are your thoughts there?
First, Gary, I just noticed how you enjoy that captain's chair to hand these things out. I'll babble on for a minute and then give Nick a chance to pull together a more coherent response. I mean, I think it's an absolutely great question, and we're in just an unknown, uncharted territory on this one. Normally, we would not have seen anything like this, like the MFP program, payments created based on, in response to the trade conflict. So that kind of thing it wasn't contemplated. And now with the coronavirus, with this COVID pandemic, we what we're seeing happen in the markets and happen in the economy, it's hard to think through the rest of this year, let alone through to 2023 and what that debate's going to look like in Congress. I do think you're going to see a lot of talk over time about how this CCC authority is used and what kind of flexibility should or should not exist. I think that'll be one of the things that'll come out down the road a little bit more. But it does complicate it. It will complicate drastically the politics around writing a farm bill, both from inside the farm interest groups, as different commodities measure congressional programs versus CCC, USDA programs, who gets more favorable treatment where and when. That will complicate the politics. This pretty consistent set of high-level payments and large payments as compared to some of the other assistance areas, particularly conservation assistance and the food assistance programs, that's going to complicate our politics. The budget deficit situation could possibly also weigh in if we're still running high deficits. So I think the only safe answer besides saying we don't know is that it's going to make it even more complicated in 2023. Nick, that's the best I got. I don't know if you got something more.
No, I mean, it's as Jonathan said, it's a good question. We've thought about and talked about and said a lot of things off the record about with each other. But it's not a question that necessarily has a good answer at this point. I think back to, when I started learning about the crop insurance program, 20 years ago, I was always told that one of the reasons we had, the programs like crop insurance and the commodity programs as part of the safety net was to avoid having to have these uncertain kind of one-off ad hoc programs, just because of the challenges they introduced historically when we did have to do that. And so, it's interesting to see that, we're still back to relying on those things. And it does create a lot of uncertainty. I mean, it creates uncertainty for everybody involved, from the farmer to the lender to the input providers. It's not an ideal way to plan for the upcoming crop year production cycle, whatever kind of farm you're operating. So we got another question. Again, this is coming back to the CFAP program, and 2019 crop was down. Based on the question, it sounds like this person maybe had some 2018 crop still in the bin that was actually part of what was sold this spring. So things kind of get muddled in terms of bushels that were in the bin, whether that was 2019 or 2018 crop. Again, I would go back to keeping in mind that you're capped on the number of eligible inventory bushels under the CFAP program at 50% of total production for the 2019 crop. So I can see there being two things that you'd want to be able to document and verify that you're going to have to provide as you apply for the CFAP program is, one, what was your total bushels produced in 19? And then what did you have unpriced in inventory on January 15th? And then it'll be just comparing that inventory, January 15 inventory number, to 50% of the total crop. And they'll decide which number to go at from there. I think I didn't really maybe directly answer that question, but I don't know if Gary or Jonathan has anything more to add on that one.
No.
Nick, what I would add to that, just looking at the definition in the rule, and to this question in particular, it is the unpriced inventory on January 15th not to exceed 50% of 2019. So just to emphasize what you said, it is what you had. So if this person has 18 crops sitting in there, they cannot get a payment above 50% of the 19 production numbers. So I just sort of emphasize that point, that it's a cap on it. So unpriced inventory not to exceed 50% of that 2019 production. So the 2019 production number does have a controlling aspect to it.
So we have come to the end of our FarmDoc daily webinar or FarmDoc webinar today on policy alternatives, and we appreciate your time today, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.